Hi VC, James here. Welcome to another instalment of From the Collection. So far I've done blues and soul, and for this instalment I'm going to be looking at country and western. What are we listening to? Nice bit of VCLT from John Downing, 6-inch pianist. This is Chet Atkins, picks on the Beatles. Chet Atkins, great country finger stylist. I suppose you categorise him as country. I've got a confession to make. I planned this video a long time ago and the records have all been in a pile, and I started to do a bit of research and the records stayed in a pile and they started to get under my feet and my research continued, and then I started to think, who am I kidding? You know, I'm never going to be an expert in country music. I'm not going to pretend to be. There are people on the VC who know far more about it than me. Andy's Vinyl Den, and several other people. I'm not going to sit here and BS anybody and kind of make out that I'm a country expert. I'm not. So I decided in the end, let's just show what I've got and not try and pretend. Country music for me, I enjoy it. I love some of it. For me, it's kind of one of the roots of the music that I like. I mean, Chet Atkins was a big influence on George Harrison of the Beatles, and country music obviously has always been in that kind of melting pot that kind of went up to make rock and roll, and that's kind of my interest in it really. It's kind of roots music. My first exposure to it would have been the Beatles, and then as my musical taste developed I got into other bands, the Byrds and the Band and so on, and the Stones as well, who had a big country influence. And then gradually I started to check out some actual country records. I was kind of up against a prejudice from the start, in that my dad loathes country music, and it's quite funny. There's quite a funny story. Years ago when I was a child, we went on holiday to Cornwall, and there was this hotel, and in the hotel bar there was a couple of country singers, and I can't remember what they were called, but it was like a woman's name and a man's name. They were called something like Tammy and Gavin or something like that, I don't know. But my dad always used to make up these names for them. He used to call them things like Snotty and Gob, and Farty and SHIT, because he thought they were terrible. I don't know whether they were terrible or not, but I kind of grew up thinking that country music was this very kind of naff thing that really wasn't to be taken seriously. And it was only when I got into the Beatles and the Stones and kind of started to realise that country music was part of the stew, as it were, of kind of rock and roll music, that I realised that there was something there worth checking out. And over the years, I've not collected a huge number of country records, but I've got a kind of fair few. So I'll show you what I have, and I'm going to whip through them, and there's going to be minimal commentary, because like I said, I wouldn't like to make out that I was an expert on country. Headley, of course, Headley's the other person on the VC who knows far more about it than me. This is quite a good fun recent purchase. Tina Turner, Country in My Soul. Now I don't know much about this, but I suspect it's kind of early sessions. It's on this label, Dixie Frog. Not particularly well recorded, I've got to say. Sonically leaves a lot to be desired, but the actual performances are stunning. Very, very rough and ready, Tina at her rawest, and it's certainly very interesting to hear her singing that music. Much like Ray Charles, R&B singers have a tradition of doing country music. They appreciated it, they knew what it was about, they knew that there was something there worth exploring, so that was quite a good fun. Quite a recent one, don't know much about it yet, haven't researched this yet. This is Hank Locklin. Can somebody tell me anything about Hank? It's in lovely shape. RCA Camden. Haven't spun this one yet. Brand new to the collection. Gene Autry. Now this guy's name, I know Gene Autry's name from reading about the Rolling Stones. Keith Richards was really into the singing cowboys when he was growing up. When he first knew Mick Jagger as a child, apparently he used to wear a cowboy hat and tried to kind of emulate his cowboy heroes. That one's on Bulldog. I quite like cowboy songs. I used to watch westerns when I was a kid, Then I just got some generic compilations, 40 country classics, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, of course, I should have mentioned him as well, that kind of classic, crossover between rock and roll and country, which of course is very well documented. Another country comp, this one, rather nice. This is classic thrift shop find. I'm not going to get that one out, it seems a bit tightly packed. Carl Perkins, again big influence on George Harrison. When the Beatles went to Hamburg in the pre-fame days, people will know probably that they all adopted fake names. So for example, Paul McCartney became Paul Ramon, which is where the Ramones got their name from. And George Harrison was always Carl Harrison because he loved Carl so much. I do love Carl Perkins' music. I have a double CD set of his work, and I like him. I can hear the roots of the Beatles in him, you know, and he appears on Paul McCartney's Tug of War album playing a great song called Get It, which I've always loved. Really great voice, great guitar picking, and I kind of prefer him to Elvis, really, to be honest with you. Carl Perkins. This guy, of course, can't be denied. Not going to speak too much about him. I play in a band and we do quite a few Hank Williams songs. Just an immortal. Probably the kind of first ever rock and roll star in a way. A complete dick, by all counts, but his music is absolutely seminal. There's another one, quite nice. I'm not taking them out of their packs because it'll just make the video too long. This guy, George Jones, I've got a couple of records by him. This one's on Epic. This is You Ought to Be Here With Me. Now this was quite a sort of latest record by him from 1990, I think. And apparently it flopped, but it was an album that he himself had believed in quite a lot, and for some reason it didn't do very well for him. But George Jones, one of the kind of great country royalty, really. He's a name that I learned from Elvis Costello. I read Elvis Costello, an interview with him where he was talking about him. Also Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze. I think Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze, I think during the East Side Story sessions, because Elvis Costello produced East Side Story, which features a country song, of course, labelled with love. Elvis Costello started playing Glenn Tilbrook and Chris Difford some country records, and George Jones was one of the artists that he introduced them to. And they all got heavily into country at the time. And of course Elvis did his country album as well. Got another George Jones one, George Jones Anniversary. He's a good looking guy. Okay, and then I'm going to whip through these because these are very, very common. Johnny Cash, of course. No introduction needed for him. I do have a fair few Johnny albums. That's a great one. Johnny Cash Sings a Ballad of the True West Volume 2. I think I've got Volume 1 on CD, but I don't have Volume 1 on record. This is a good one. Unfortunately, even though the record looks like it's in good shape, it doesn't play very well. I can take that one out. Happiness Is You. It's just on the red Columbia label. I've tried cleaning it, but I can't get rid of the static on that one. Then San Quentin, everybody knows that. I was pleased to pick this one up because it's one of his original albums. I got it for $2.99. Reasonably recent purchase. This is A Thing Called Love. Johnny. And this one too is a reasonably recent purchase. This is the soundtrack from I Walk the Line. Now Andy's Vinyl Den Andy did a whole video on Loretta Lynn, and shortly after I saw his video I picked this album up from a thrift store, and this is a great album actually. We Only Make Believe. My understanding is that they recorded a lot together. This is just one of the albums that they made, and it's got some great stuff on it. It's really good. If you see that, pick it up. And check out Andy's video. I might put the link down below to that if I can find it, because it was a great video all about Loretta Lynn. Great name, isn't it? Conway Twitty. The Stanley Brothers, the kind of record that you'll see on Headley's channel. Now, where did I learn about the Stanley Brothers? It would have been from maybe Gillian Welch, or one of those kind of singer-songwriters who talk a lot about this kind of music, you know, bluegrass type stuff. I used to share a house with a guy who was a banjo picker. He was really good. He used to sit around in his pants all day long practicing the banjo, and he was extremely good, and he used to play me a lot of banjo music. And I wouldn't say I got massively into it, but I do enjoy listening to the Stanley Brothers on occasion. Another kind of classic old name, Ernest Tubb, who I believe had his own record shop, I think, in Nashville. Star of the Grand Ole Opry, I think. I'm terrified about stating any facts in this video in case I get them wrong. Ernest Tubb. Any Country Collection, of course, needs a bit of Willie. Great cover. A staple of charity shops the world over. This was actually a gift, a VCLT from Graham Watson, and this is a fantastic album. I mean, you see it everywhere, you know, and you can just pick it up for hardly anything, and yet it is a fantastic album. Really well produced. He does really great crooning on it. If you see this, pick it up, it's great. I think I've heard Vinyl Richie talking about this album too. Just a great example of a brilliant record that you can pick up very cheaply. This guy I heard about from reading about Keith Richards. When Graham Parsons hooked up with Keith Richards and Nell Coate, when they were doing the Exile on Main Street sessions, Graham Parsons taught Keith Richards the mechanics of country music on the piano, and Merle Haggard was one of the artists whose songs they studied together. They kind of studied the form, and you know, I think Merle Haggard was a big influence on the Stones at that time. Via Graham Parsons. That's Going Where the Lonely Go on Epic. This one is Let Me Tell You About a Song. And that one is on the yellow Capitol label. And then I have a very best of Merle Haggard. I mean, Merle Haggard is one of these guys who was, I mean, he was a really strong songwriter as well as a singer, and he had a very specific take on things. You know, I mean, his writing could often seem to be very conservative. It's like he was kind of speaking up for the straights often, you know, in the middle of all the kind of 60s madness. Sort of reminds me of what the band did. Just a really interesting songwriter. It's Merle. And this guy, Floyd Kramer, a pianist who played with everybody. You know, he played on Elvis records, he played he would have played on, you know, a lot of seminal country records. I think he might even be on Heartbreak Hotel. I think he's the pianist on Heartbreak Hotel. I don't know how many records he made on his own. I've got a couple. This was the only one I could find. This is RCA, Orange RCA. But if you see any Floyd Kramer records, pick them up. He had a very distinctive little style, a little right-hand piano figure that he used to do, which was his signature, which kind of, you know, got him lots of work on lots of different artists' records. But I mean, you can see down here there's lots of different records by him. Sorry about the glare. You can see here, a fairly prolific artist, and like I said, he works with lots of different people. Floyd Kramer. This box was in a charity shop. It was in Oxfam, and it looked amazing, but it had no price on it, and I thought to myself, it's going to be expensive, so I left it there, not expecting it to be there next time I went. But I went along a few weeks later and it was still there, and it had the price on of £2.99, so I thought I'd check it out. Just need to change the record. And this is what you get, the world of country music. You get a nice booklet, the story of a sound. And then you get these lovely records. They're not in the right order, but that was Country America, Country Romance, Tex Ritter, Glenn Campbell, Bobby Gentry. You know, a good list of people. Country Classics. I just love the covers. Sonny James, Eddie Kirk, Buck Owens, Hank Thompson, Jimmy Wakely, Tennessee Ford. Country Ladies. Rose Maddox, Bobby Gentry, Wanda Jackson, Gene Shepherd, Betsy Gay. Country Cowboys, Tex Ritter, Tex Williams, Hank Thompson, Furlin Husky, and good old country. Hank Thompson, Merle Travis, Sonny James, Glenn Campbell. Just to show you one of the records, I mean they're absolutely mint. Mint they are. And then you get another booklet which contains some nice prints. Mounting of Wild One. These strongly remind me of westerns that I used to watch when I was a child. Things like Champion the Wonder Horse, which I used to absolutely love, and The High Chaparral as well. When I was a kid, those shows were on TV all the time. And then these things here, this look at this. Reader's Digest. It's an advertisement. Amazing. I can't believe I got all this for $2.99 or whatever. More advertising material. And then the World Records Guide to Record and Cassette Care. And the World Records Guarantee. So, yeah, $2.99. The world of country music, and that was my country collection. Thanks VC, have a great day. Please give me a like and a subscribe if it takes your fancy. Take care, bye.